Fred Brooks joins us for a discussion on PV arrays and his work as an infrared service provider based out of Hawaii. We'll talk about how he got started in the industry, some of the best practices used to look at solar panels, and the challenges involved. Well, all of that and more coming up next. Well, we'll kick it off with aloha, Fred. It's great to see you. How you been?
Great, Matt. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm doing fantastic. Another beautiful day out here and getting a cruise in the yard and talk story. It's great.
Well, it looks absolutely beautiful there. No, it's great to have you on. Thanks for being here for this interview. I just wanted to first off maybe get to know you a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do? Obviously, you're based out of Hawaii here, but give me your background, please. Tell us more about how you got started in this industry with thermal imaging.
Perfect. Started from coming out of the Navy. And then when I went back to college, I ended up getting an environmental science degree, did a lot of photovoltaic engineering, and then got into the PV industry. And was sitting there in around 2012, I did a job, and one of the contractors turned around to me and said, "Listen, the bank really wants you to have a certified thermographer taking images. Do you know how to do that?" So, well, I think I can find out. So immediately I went on the internet, found the Infrared Training Center. And then luckily they had someone coming out here. Rusty, thank you very much for coming to Hawaii. And
nice.
That was in 2012. And it was the beginning of a beautiful journey. I've learned a lot and gotten to teach on it. And I've done my level 2 class with Ron. He helped me out. And I got to spend 8.5 years stationed out of Pearl Harbor and liked Hawaii so much. I loved growing up in New York, but staying in Hawaii has its own little benefits. I don't wear a wetsuit to go in the water year round, so right there was a perk.
In New Hampshire, we have to almost wear a wetsuit. It's not quite that cold, but it's certainly not like Hawaii, I'm sure. So you said 2012. What was your first camera that you were working with back then?
I had the i7, and it was actually, since I took the class, I knew it was one of the demo models that they had, so they actually offered it to me, knowing that I was doing. And as a matter of fact, I still have it and it still works.
Nice. So you mentioned Rusty, you mentioned Ron. Any fond memories of training? Anything that stands out from you from that experience? Or
I thought it was just great. Russ's knowledge. It was also great talking with him, just because we also got to talk about fishing a lot, and he truly enjoyed the different areas. But the idea of the thermal camera, and he was explaining really well on. We weren't looking at heat, but we were interpreting heat signatures. That was something that hit home with that. And then when I did my level 2 with Ron, he started pointing out more of the nuances about why reflective temperatures and knowing the surrounding areas and what you have going on was really cool. And he had some really amazing, he had a lot of video footage, which was really amazing. And so I thought it was great being able to get from the initial levels up and having it set.
So tell us more about your business, Pacific Panel Cleaners. You do PV inspections. What else?
Yeah, so Pacific Panel Cleaners started in 2009 out here in lovely Hawaii. Basically, it came out of, I noticed a niche on the market. Nobody was doing any of it. And it was after I helped install and design, at the time, one of the biggest systems in the Hawaiian Islands. It was $4.6 million. I was like, "Are you guys doing anything to maintain it?" And everybody said no, of course. So started researching and found out through the manuals to do an annual cleaning inspection every year. And then my background was I helped design and install systems. So I started with the general idea, as I refer to everybody, was BC, before children. Sat there and you start going out, and my idea was to clean a couple panels in the morning, then the afternoon you get to go surf. But it evolved more and more. As I was going up and doing cleanings, I was inspecting, because I used to help people design and install the systems. So I was seeing the other work on that. And that's what I said in 2012. After I helped do the largest carport structure, I was a third-party construction manager. And they told me they wanted me to be the maintenance contractor, but I needed to get my thermal imaging certification. And that's how that all started. And, with us at Pacific Panel Cleaners now, we do cleaning inspection. Thermal imaging is a big part of what we do. We have a drone program. We actually were given one of the first thermal imaging drones, the FLIR View. When that came out, I actually got a call and asked if I wanted to pre-order it.
Nice.
So we do full service maintenance. We clean the panels, we inspect the system, we do monitoring troubleshooting. I teach classes on it for people. We're certified on multiple inverters on the system, so we work on the inverters. And of course, thermal imaging helps us piece everything together to find problems and identifying issues. I know we're going to go into more of that later and show the picture, so it'll be a little cooler when you can see the picture.
Yeah, you did bring a number of examples, which we'll get to here in the next segment. I'm myself interested in learning more about what you're doing. Obviously, what year did the drone work kind of kick in for you? What year did you start using aerial infrared?
I think I bought the first drone in like 2016 is when we had it.
Okay.
But the drone started really coming in a lot bigger around 2020, right when COVID hit, because the technology was just developing a lot better. And I would say in the past 3 years, my drone team has really grown and improved. So it's been phenomenal. They all get the thermal imaging certifications. They're FAA certified pilots, but just the level that we're doing, and like we work with home inspectors. So home inspectors in Hawaii, at least, they are not able to really give you inspections on the PV systems. So we work with realtors and different groups that are selling things and home inspectors to say, listen, can you also come and check out our system? And they really like the part when we fly the thermal drone and we point out any possible other issues that are on it, along with everything else we've inspected.
And how did that impact your business? You started in 2012 with handheld thermography and then made the switch here to aerial infrared. Describe that for someone, let's say, who's maybe considering adding possibly a drone to their arsenal to do these types of inspections. How did it impact your business going to aerial infrared?
So, as I've said at different places I've given trainings and given speeches at, an O&M company that's not doing thermal imaging isn't a full O&M company. It basically has put us above to a different level. So we're able to bring in a full package and not just show them the images, explain to them what's seen, and to help mitigate any possible future issues. So I would say it's a big component of the professionalism we're able to bring to the table. And a lot of clients really like it because it gives definitive answers. We've been able to go to sites and after other people have done work and identified that things weren't connected properly. And it's really helped on a general level. But one of the best things that's happened over as the time has progressed and year over year, that you'll know, like some of the drones that you have, you program the path, right? Mm-hmm. So year over year at the same sites that we go to, because we do annual inspections, we fly the same path. And if we find an anomaly, we're then able to point out like, hey, this hasn't been here the past 2 years. We're starting to find it now. This might be indicative of a future problem. Yeah, it's been a game changer. It's really stepped us up a level as people who look at us. And also for different sites that they might have their own field service team, like a solar farm, but they don't have drone pilots that know what they're looking at. So we're actually able to come and help supplement some of these other companies by our knowledge and skill sets with that.
Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions or thoughts about today's topic, be sure to leave a comment, or if you want, contact us directly. Feel free to reach out to the Infrared Training Center. Call us at 1-866-872-4647 or send us an email at info@infraredtraining.com. So Fred, let's talk about your typical PV inspection. How does it start? What do you have to think about before you get out there and look at panels?
So when you're talking about the PV inspection using the thermal camera, one of the most important things you're going to think about is, what's the weather going to be? Like, am I going to have sunshine or no sunshine? As a general rule of thumb, we don't thermal image unless if it's 500 watts per meter squared or better coming in, just for a baseline on the PV panel. So you're looking for clear weather, you're checking your weather pattern. You also don't want to go there if you're going to thermal scan and know if it was raining in the morning, because you're going to have ponding. And one of the best ideal conditions is making sure the panels are clean so you don't get a bunch of false anomalies on it. So when you're looking for the PV inspection with the thermal camera, those are your setups. But you also want to make sure that you have working knowledge of the system to make sure like the inverters are on, the equipment's actually running, because non-running equipment, you're not going to find any anomalies because it's not working.
But besides the infrared camera, what other types of equipment are you working with? What other tools should people be considering bringing with them to do these types of inspections?
So for us on the full system inspection and testing, we're actually bringing like IV curve testers and voltmeters just to make sure that like if we have a combiner box, we're checking the various strings to see what you have for the IV curve test, making sure you have it. And this works out really great because just say for instance you have a diode failure and on your test you're noticing voltage low on a string, you can correlate the lower voltage on the string to where the diode is on the panel. So now you have direct data with the thermal camera pointing out where the diode is. Does two things for you. Number one, it's going to help you for your RMA because now you know the exact panel to go and test. Number two is you have quantitative data of comparative string voltages. So that's if you're doing the full testing on a system. So that's what we like to bring with us.
All right. Now, are there any procedures that you typically follow, standards that you would recommend that people look up? What is there anything that guides you through the inspection process? I guess is the question.
So I've written a couple articles on the way to do the inspections the way I would do them or we do them. Generally speaking, the first way we do an inspection is you're going to run your visual inspection and then you're going to run your thermal drone inspection or thermal handheld camera inspection. The reason you're going to do this, it's a two-part process. Like everything else is the pieces have to match together. You can go and you can identify and note certain pieces of equipment are operating or not operating, what conditions they are. And if you're running your testing on it, just say an old system combiner box, you might have variances that you're looking for and say, okay, I might see this. Let me be more aware or acute of looking for this type of issue. Or for example, you do your walkthrough and you'll notice a broken panel. You know, what could have caused it? So you're looking at that. So I usually start, so before I go, just say for instance, I have two carports and a roof on a big commercial site. Before I go, I'll build a map out labeling A, B, and then rooftop, how I'm going to do my walkthrough. So I can have, just say, panel number 20, 3N is broken. I have that already laid out. It's a 7Ps. So I don't know if I've gone over the 7Ps with you, but Al Seaman, thanks a lot for teaching that to me many years ago in the Navy. Proper prior planning prevents poor production. So we make sure that you have everything ahead because in case if you do find an anomaly, you want to be able to note it or at least have a general idea on noting it. So getting that lined up and set up are the areas on my general procedures on the report and how I want to follow it and making sure we have it. And of course, one of the best ways on the PV system, always check the monitoring before you go out there. You'll know if system's working or not.
Well, that's the perfect way to approach it because I was going to ask you the next question here is you can do all this prep. You know, you've got the procedures, you got your standard operating procedures, and you've got that plan going in there. Still, I'm sure challenges come up. What are some of the challenges that you run into during these types of inspections?
So perfect example is if you did just say you went and the system got cleaned, you're ready to inspect it, you're doing great. Windstorm comes, now it blows a gaggle of leaves on top of your system. So that's just going to throw a bunch of false anomalies. You know, you're sitting there, you know, the weather conditions, if they change, like out here, we can get microclimates, so that'll change. Those are little snafus that end up happening. Or like you're trying to get to the electrical room and nobody has the keys for you to go in to verify different equipment's working, or you don't have the monitoring you thought you had. It's like those are your general ones. But like I said, usually following the 7Ps. After the starting this in 2009, all the years of doing it, we've pretty much lined them up. Enough mistakes have been made along the way, such as, you know, not letting people know that you're going to fly a drone in their parking lot. You know, people come running out freaking about that. But, you know, that's the general concept is you want to make sure everything you have lined up and trying to mitigate any of these failures. You know, it's good when you're doing the walkthrough. If you're doing the walkthrough, for instance, and notice, like we get black mold on panels out here, all the panels will have black mold in the corners. And you're just going to have to tell the client if they didn't do the cleaning, listen, you're going to have to do a cleaning because we could fly it, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have so many false anomalies. I'm not going to be able to give you a written report stating this is an actual anomaly because of so many possible issues. So those are the minor ones that we've run into. Other ones that have happened is They just had the area painted, and a bunch of paint got all over the panels that they weren't aware of. These are some of the challenges that we've bounced into, but luckily they've been mitigated pretty well with most of our sites, because before we run into contractor doing this stuff, we always do an initial site visit.
If you're enjoying today's conversation, be sure to get social with the Infrared Training Center. You can follow us on X, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for helpful tips, thermal imaging best practices, and much more. Stay tuned until the end for details on infrared training and special offers that might be available for thermographers. All right, Fred, so you brought some examples. I've got those loaded up here. I just want to take some time to go through each one. This one caught my eye. We're talking about hot spots. This one looks pretty hot. How often are you seeing things like fires kind of starting up with these PV arrays?
So, unfortunately, I've seen multiple spots like this on panels. Fortunately, I haven't seen too many or called in for too many catastrophic failures, as I would refer to them. There's been a couple out in Hawaii that I've been privy to come in and check out. But a lot of times you'll start seeing these, and if you look at the image itself, you can see it's contained within a single cell. So it's like a cell failure. And the one on the left, I remember that image exactly. And it was 102 degrees Celsius. We saw it with the camera on the top side. So the craziest part is looking at these, they were still operating. And that's when it becomes more of the concern, because it's still operating. And then you could have the condition as the back sheet on these starts burning out. This is where the major concerns start happening, because if you have a site, for instance, a ground mount system, and someone hasn't been doing vegetation management, the panel might not be where everything burns off, but that burn can drop onto the grass that can actually lead to the fire. Same thing on rooftop conditions. If I always tell people, make sure you don't keep detritus build up underneath it. When I say detritus, leaves, nesting, garbage, because if the panel starts this, it'll now have another place to ignite. For the most part, shingles don't really ignite too much, or Monier tiles or concrete tiles, but this can go. But as there has been unfortunately seen, there have been multiple PV panel fires, and not all of them come from the panels. A lot of them from bad connections, miswiring, and different reasons. But the thermal camera has been able to help us identify these hotspots and pull these panels out of the system. So it's mitigating the possible situation.
How about this next example here? It looks like a non-working inverter. Tell us about that.
So one of the ideas of when you do the initial walkthrough that I talked about, you do your visual check, and you can see if the inverters are running or not. PV systems, we make PVs try to make it easier that, red means it's not working, green means it's operating, yellow might mean a fault or whatever, right? So if you're walking through and you see green on them all, you'll think that they're working. But sometimes you actually get intermittent operations on units. So the thermal camera can actually identify if it's non-working, or on the flip side, if you're looking at the units, if one's a lot hotter than the others, it might be a fan not working. So one of the biggest things I always do, and I give props to Sesame Street in my upbringing, thermal scanning. Which one of these is not like the other? Let's find out why. So I write down non-working inverter. It's a little bit easier than saying possible non-fan working. So if you're looking at them, you want to go and check them out when you're there at the site. If you have two next to each other, one showing a heat signature, one's not, check them out. Or one showing a higher heat signature than the other, you still check them out. There could be multiple possibilities. But the thermal camera finds it really quick from a far distance away. That one that was on the left. Yeah, that one on the left, I remember I walked up to the site and I pulled out the camera. And I remember that one, I was like, oh, these are the two that are not working, because it was labeled on monitoring, but nobody knew what labels were on the site. So we were able to bring it. And then we were also able to tell them that the labeling was a little bit off on the site compared to the monitoring. So that was also neat. But that's a whole other setup.
No, I love that. I love, which one of these is not like the other. We say that all the time in training classes. It's a lot of infrared. It's just qualitative. It's finding which one of these is different. That's a great example there. No, I love that. How about a down string? I know that comes up. Tell us about what we're seeing here.
So I like doing the visual and the thermal because I always try to tell people my thermal camera sees things that the naked eye can't see on a regular basis. You teach the classes, you know about that. So this one was good because a lot of times as an O&M provider, these installers have left and they're gone. And they haven't left all the information exactly where everything's laid out. So we sometimes will identify a non-working string by testing or monitoring. It's not working. Well, we need to find it. So looking at that, you're able to find it. Now, what I like to tell everybody, because everybody says, oh, the non-working string is the colder string. I tell people, no, the non-working string is the hotter string. And the reason being is when the string isn't operating, you're going to get a short circuit current. Thermal scanning, we're looking for heat. Short circuit current has the highest current. Therefore, you're going to get your highest heat signature. And that's how you can identify where the down string is. Really helps out a lot.
And this was another example here. It looks like with Aerial, SUAS. Where
Oh,
was
yeah.
this and what was happening here?
This was over on Kauai, and this is on one of their farms that they were sitting there and they had a little bit lower production, but they don't have monitoring for the system. And the weird item was we just went and they wanted us to just check to see why it might not be producing. So we went down, we looked through a quick check that the inverters were running. We didn't do actual individual inverter checks. And Leah, the drone commander for Pacific Panel Cleaner, she got to fly that drone up, and within about 45 seconds, we identified the exact location of it's two different inverters, and each inverter has two down strings. So it was a pretty wild find. And then the reason we didn't notice the real difference is because the inverters were next to each other, so they were producing comparatively the same amount. So once again, it was a quick comparative analysis. But then when you looked at the other inverters in different areas, then we found out they had the same stringing. This all then made sense.
And just to go to this for a second, back to the point of handheld thermography versus drone operations, something of this size, you said 45 seconds and she immediately found the issue.
Yeah.
What would it take to walk something like this with a handheld from the past? What kind of differences are we talking about in terms of time commitment?
Well, first thing you need to bring is a gallon of water because you're going to be out there for a while. If we had to walk that site and we wanted to map it, it would probably take, you would have a good part of a day that you were going to walk.
Out there.
And the reason I say a good part of the day is because you got to remember, we're walking with an irradiance meter, so you're checking for consistency on the irradiance. And we're saying a good time of the day is basically we'd be looking from 10 to 2 o'clock. We'd want to do the walkthrough. And then the one issue is you'd have to make sure you're looking really good because with the downstring, you'd have to find it at the cut, right where they start. So walking through. So a lot of times what we'll do is just say it wasn't a downstring, it was a hot spot or a diode issue or something of that way. We fly the drone. We find the location. We have it mapped. And because we had our map planned out, we know exactly where it is. Then we walk over to it with the handheld. Because sometimes you'll find a hot spot in locations like this. I have other images from this exact site that the birds, because the birds all sit around and they like to eat food. They sit on top of the panels and they all create their own little hot spot.
Well, these are some failed diodes, it looks like, from the air. Tell us about this. What was happening here?
So if you look at the image on the left, the far one, you will see the failed diode because it's 1/3 of the panel. You're able to identify it. On the image on the left also, yep, right there. On the image on the left, if you're looking, you can see a lot of the junction boxes on the panels also. That's how sensitive the thermal camera is. But there's 2 of the junction boxes on that image that are actually overheating. So we actually found that to be part of a precursor to a diode failure. And then the image on the right, this was an optimizer system. So those 2 that you see on the top were completely failed optimizers. So they were overheating. And then the 2 that you see with the little checker pattern and the one to the right of that, the one on the checker pattern, that was one of the first times I've ever seen it. That was the very initial beginnings of a diode failure. and the one next to it was a full diode failure. We did a bunch of testing on those panels because I got really, really curious as it was the first time I saw it. But those are quick anomalies that we were able to check out.
Well, I was asked about this one recently in a training class. Had a student who attended who's doing inspections just like yourself, and inspections from underneath. And the question came up is, how viable is this type of work? You're looking from on the underside, and that's something I guess that's more common than people might realize.
So once again, if you're gonna do underneath inspection, you got to make sure you're looking above it first. Make sure there's no twigs or sticks or leaves all over it. That's one of the most critical items. Many years ago, I posted some of these images, and someone was like, "That's the sun causing that." And I was like, "That's not the sun causing it." I knew where the location was. I was like, I took my training class. I knew how to use a thermal camera, but underneath, you are able to identify it. We do this on some of the rooftops we go to have a sail system, basically a giant canopy structure that's built out. I call it a giant sail. And that's how they were able to put it up on the roof to get the best azimuth and everything. And we're able to handheld underneath and find any problems underneath. So it was one that had downed optimizers. And once again, didn't leave us a map. They didn't have the right map on the monitoring because it didn't even show up. So we knew there was downed optimizers, and the thermal camera helped us find it. We walked behind and were able to identify them.
And that's exactly what was happening in this particular situation.
Yeah, that one is when the optimizer is starting to slowly fail. So I'll say failed optimizers are starting to fail. When they start failing, they start showing a checkered pattern because it's going for its MPPT tracking. So it's actually making diodes work in all different ways.
Hi. Well, you mentioned the shadow box effect here a few slides ago. What's this all about? What are we seeing here? Is this it's in the shade? Is that what's happening, or?
So actually, this shows you that that's one of the diodes actually properly working because there was a slight shadow that's happening on the system. So this once again talks about your time of going up and doing your inspection and knowing when you're up there looking at it. You got to be aware that shadows will create diodes to actually work, but also seeing that if you see that type of a hotspot in the same corners, just say you have 10 panels in a row and you see that hotspot in all the same corners, it's all dirt in the same corner.
Huh.
So that's why we talk about the 7Ps and talk about understanding what you're looking at. You got to take it all into effect because that little shadow is actually creating a diode. So you got to tell the customer, your panels are working because the diodes was working in that one. But one of the other problems that you might have is it keeps creating these diodes to work, so they might eventually fail on you.
Well, you mentioned the birds a moment ago, Fred. I got one more here. Bird on a panel.
That's the site. That's actually the site of Kauai.
You weren't lying. I mean, this is. I've never seen anything like this before. But is this a shadow of a bird causing the anomaly? Is that correct?
Yep. And in case if anybody else asks, yeah, we're aware that the sun was reflecting on the other panel up there, but that's definitely the bird. You can see him if you're looking really close on it. You can see him sitting there, and yep, we saw it. She saw it actually from about 300 feet up. She's like, I think that's a bird. And we came in. I think that image probably was 125 feet up. But yeah, so once again, this falls down to a perfect example of just say I flew the drone at your site and I said, hey, Matt, I found all these hot spots. Then you say, okay, did you do anything? No, I just found it with the drone. Well, this is when you now had your map set up. You laid it out. You flew it. You understood. You knew exactly what was on the map. Then you take your handheld. Then you walk there to see, is this a real anomaly or did something else cause it?
Interesting. Fascinating. Well, this has caught me by surprise when you sent this over, because my first thought was, what if that bird flies away and you just happen to catch that at that exact moment?
Oh, yeah.
You might think something else entirely is going on. And in fact, it was just a bird taking a break.
Yep. And that's why it's also really good because that bird will create that hotspot for a little bit. So then just said we flew it, we saw it as a hotspot, we walk down there, we look at it, then that just goes up to being a false anomaly.
Wow.
And then you'd end up looking and you knew that birds were definitely sitting up there. And they all sit around in the field because they mow the lawn around the field and they all go and they get to eat all the bugs. So they got a great spot to hang out.
Well, this has been great, Fred. Fascinating. I've learned a lot today. This is very good. We're gonna, like I said, we'll get this up and posted and available for people to download and watch. But some great insight here onto your inspections with Pacific Panel Cleaners and looking at PV arrays with thermal imaging. Fred, thanks again. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming out.
Right on, Matt. Super appreciate you always. You have an amazing day, good sir. Aloha.
Remember, if you have any questions on today's topic, please feel free to reach out to the Infrared Training Center directly. Call us at 1-866-872-4647 or reach us via email at info@infraredtraining.com. Our website is where you'll also find other free tutorials on a variety of topics and our complete training schedule. Plus, we also run a number of special training offers throughout the year. To learn more, give us a call or visit the Infrared Training Center online at infraredtraining.com. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you online again soon.